Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the notoriously sanctimonious R&B. I couldn't have planned it better. Look at that. Tallulah and Gilbert running by in the background. Amazing. It was just like I cued them or had a first AD cue them. Anyway, greetings to all of you imagination connoisseurs, all of you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Welcome to Robservations, the show about the Robservations what? Robservations, the show about something. This is, of course, Robservations live chat number 210. My God. I mean, I say that every day, but every day I come back I'm like, it's kind of like how I wake up in the morning. I just wake up with a sense of awe and wonder about the world and life in general and the universe. Life, the universe, and everything. And we all know what the answer to that is. It's 42. But anyway, I just want to say thank you all for being here. My God, I can't believe it. Robservations number 210. Unbelievable. Brought to you, of course, as you all know, by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com, and when you check out and punch in PGS, you get 20% off your order. By the way, I found out something I didn't know. There have been members of this, the Imagination Connoisseur community of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity, who have gone to the Lucky Tiger website more than once to buy things. And the second time you've tried to buy things, your PGS coupon has not worked. Well, guess what? Because I am who I am, because I wield power, at least within the Lucky Tiger website realm. If you go back again, we're fixing that so you can go back and order more than once and get your 20% discount. So we are taking care of that. By the way, thank you for pointing that out. Those of you who've gone to the Lucky Tiger website, I hope you enjoy their products. I know I do. I wouldn't let them sponsor me if I didn't like their product. Anyway, they are still, as you know, through this weekend, they are still running their Tailgater giveaway to celebrate. Well, it's the end of the postseason this weekend. My God, finally it's over. So the Jedi Knights of the Pacific Northwest, I of course mean the Seattle Seahawks, led by Uncle Pete Carroll. They're going all the way this year. They look good. There's one more weekend of preseason before the regular season. Well, at least the regular NFL season starts. And Lucky Tiger through Labor Day weekend is still having their giveaway. They're giving away over $500 worth of tailgating swag, which, you guys could use, at least if you live in the continental United States, I suppose. But you can sign up free of charge at their website, not just at getluckytiger.com, but also at clubluckytiger.com. So you know what? I've been thinking a lot about, would it surprise any of you to know that I've been thinking a lot about Star Wars? I've got Star Wars on the brain, not just because of D23 last weekend, not just because I'm thinking about Cassian Andor and all of it, and K2SO coming back. I mean, I'm thinking about The Mandalorian. I'm thinking about Ben Kenobi, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm thinking about everybody. And, when I think about Ben Kenobi, I think about one of our great moderators, Greg Smith, because he cosplays Obi-Wan Kenobi for the 501st Legion, which is odd because if you think about it, the 501st Legion is, of course, Vader's fist. So maybe Greg only cosplays Boba Fett when he's with Vader's fist, because I don't know how that would be if you're cosplaying Obi-Wan Kenobi and you're part of the 501st. I don't know. Greg should have to explain that. I noticed he is here. Maybe he can explain, but he does a hell of an Obi-Wan cosplay because he's got the beard and he looks fantastic. So anyway, I think a lot about Star Wars, and I'll tell you guys, Greg Smith and I in 1985, you can actually see this if you watch the various videos I've done with Greg. Greg and I were first in line. We camped overnight on 6th Avenue in Seattle in front of the UA 150 theater that used to be on 6th and Blanchard until they blew it up. The same people who blew up the Statue of Liberty in Planet of the Apes must have blown up the UA 150, because the UA 150 was one of the world's great movie theaters, and Star Wars played at the UA 150. It was one of the theaters. I don't know if it was the longest run, but it was one of the longest runs of the original Star Wars at any theater. It played for over a year at the UA 150, and it was great. So in 1985, Lucasfilm picked 9 theaters across North America where they showed, for the very first time, they showed the original trilogy, Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi, all together as part of one show. And it was benefiting PBS, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the public broadcasting service. Greg Smith and I went. We did some, we basically did, I would call it bro cosplay, where we did some cosplay with the least amount of effort. I had my Dawn Post Studios mask of Yoda and Vader, and Greg had a black, a trench coat on, and I basically Greg brought me a tie-dyed green shirt and a rope, or it was more of a blanket and a rope, and we did that. We were first in line in 1985 together. So, Greg Smith has some bona fides as far as your moderator. His fandom goes way, way back. Our fandom together goes way back. We've been fans together. But anyway, I've been thinking a lot about Star Wars, and I go online sometimes when I want to find some Star Wars. I want to feel the sweet, sweet love I felt for Star Wars as a young man. And I don't think I felt when Star Wars was new, the original Star Wars, when it first came out, we didn't know what it was. So it was a new thing, and it was so overwhelming. It was so overwhelming, you couldn't even anticipate it. It's kind of like the first time when you're a guy and it's the first time you put your hand up a girl's shirt when you're making out. It's this glorious experience, but you can't remember it because it's so fantastical that it all becomes a blur and time bends. It's like when you're making out with your girlfriend for the first time at her house and you think you have 3 hours, and indeed you do, but it seems like it's about 10 minutes because it took you 2 hours and 50 minutes before you tried to go up her shirt. Anyway, I don't know if maybe this metaphor isn't working for anybody, but it was like for me. It was like that. So when you saw Star Wars for the first time, it was overwhelming. It was like first kissing a girl. It was that mind-blowing. It was amazing. It was amazing. But I don't think Star Wars made sweet, sweet love to me. I didn't think I was adept enough or ready for it. I didn't know what Empire Strikes Back was going to do to me. I wasn't ready. And looking at all the hate and the vitriol online about Star Wars this, Star Wars that, everyone's bitching and moaning, complaining. You know what we don't talk about enough? We don't talk about the love that we have for Star Wars, the lust that we have for Star Wars. At least I don't. Maybe, and I figured, today, after we talked a lot about a lot of different things, I just, I was in the garage yesterday working on the Imaginarium, and I was looking at all my Star Wars stuff that I have, whether it's action figures or model kits or spaceships or whatever it is. And I was thinking about my Star Wars love. I was feeling an almost fundamentalist vibe, like fire. It was almost like I was at a revival in my own mind of Star Wars. And I was like, I could feel it. I could feel the spirit of Star Wars just permeating my soul. I was feeling the love. And it made me think back. It made me think back to the time I was a young man. I was 13. I think, I want to say it was like May 23rd, May 24th. The Seattle International Film Festival in 1980. You could buy, in conjunction with the Seattle International Film Festival, you could buy tickets to go see the very first showing of The Empire Strikes Back in Seattle. Now I was 13, and it was very interesting. They did it. There were 4 showings. There was a showing at midnight. There was a showing at 3 a.m., a showing at 6 a.m., and a showing at 9 a.m. Well, because I was 13, no matter how much begging and pleading that I did with my parents, there was no way they were going to let me go see a midnight movie on a school night or something. But I did convince them, which is weird because I did convince them that I could go to the 9 o'clock show, the last show. So I was in the 7th grade, and this is important. It was important in my life because I had just turned 13. I was a bar mitzvah boy. Some of you might not know, but yes, I was raised a Jew. I learned Hebrew. I went to Sunday school. I was, in fact, bar mitzvahed. So 1980 was a big, big, big year for me. Not only did I become a man, sure, but The Empire Strikes Back opened. And it was I was finishing up my first year of junior high, which was a transitional moment in anyone's lives. Are there junior highs anymore? Like, I went to a 3-year junior high school, so it was 7th, 8th, and 9th, and then you became a sophomore at high school. But at my junior high, I was the last I was the last, and I believe Greg Smith was as well. We were part of the last ninth grade class at South Mercer Junior High, and then it switched over and it became a middle school, Mercer Island Middle School. I'm from Mercer Island, Washington. That's where I grew up. So anyway, going to The Empire Strikes Back was a big deal. I put on my Don Post Studios Darth Vader mask, and I had a black cloak, and I got onto a Metro bus, a Seattle Metro bus. So I had to take the 202 from one end of Mercer Island to the other end of Mercer Island, and then get onto another bus. I forget the actual number, but it was the 202. Maybe it was the 210. I don't remember. I took another bus, 2 buses, to get to downtown Seattle, to get in line to go see The Empire Strikes Back at 9 a.m. And it was very funny because I was, I wasn't tall, but I wasn't short, but I was still 13. I was the shortest Darth Vader anyone had ever seen when I stepped onto that Metro bus. But anyway, so I get down there, and of course, it was a raucous atmosphere. There were some kids with their parents. I think I was the only kid that was 13. I was there with, of course, Jolie Von Seur and her mom, and it was a big deal. Big deal happening. It was incredible. And see, the anticipation for The Empire Strikes Back was unlike, I mean, we anticipate movies now. We have the internet, and we can discuss these things. I mean, by the time a movie shows up, we've been already talking about it for a year because we've seen the trailers and we've dissected them. But back then, back in the dark times before social media, it was a different world. And the only time you could get information, I didn't read the trades. So whenever you saw magazine articles like Starlog was, of course, anything in Starlog you'd pour over, and of course they were promoting it heavily. There were other magazines, Cinefantastique, Fangoria had come out at the time, and it was a big deal. R2-D2 and C-3PO were actually on the cover of Fangoria magazine, believe it or not. So was Mr. Spock for Star Trek: The Motion Picture. So going into seeing Empire, it was the anticipation was it was enormous. Like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was so Star Warsed up. I had the action figures, the posters, the music, the music for Star Wars, for Empire Strikes Back. The album was actually released before the movie opened. So I had bought the record, the double disc, the two album soundtrack, and I had listened to the Imperial March, which my 13-year-old brain, the Imperial March was like, imagine you love Star Wars, you have not seen Empire yet, so there was no way to understand where the Imperial March showed up in the movie, but it was clearly one of the coolest pieces of music ever. I had memorized I memorized the silences between tracks on the Star Wars soundtrack. I mean, it was that kind of thing. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I listened to the Star Wars soundtrack. So getting the Empire soundtrack, na 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 na. The asteroid field? I mean, we'd seen clips of an asteroid field in the trailer, but what did it all mean? Like, where did it all go? You just didn't know. You listen to this music, and I know it wasn't even about spoilers or anything. I'm going to admit something. I might have admitted this on the show. You guys are going to judge me. You're going to become judgy judgersons after I tell you this. The novelization for The Empire Strikes Back came out before the movie 2. I read the novelization before I saw the film. I'm not proud. I read the novelization of The Empire Strikes Back before I saw the movie. I know. I'm sure a lot of you, especially the younger people in the audience, are shocked because they would never, you young people, you don't want to know what spoilers are these days, do you? I'm kidding, of course. Look, if somebody, you can't understand. I mean, like, I went to the bookstore all the time. I was always buying books. The novelization of Empire Strikes Back was there. The novelization of Star Trek: The Motion Picture was so good. I couldn't not buy it. And of course, once you bought it, it was honestly, I would imagine, I mean, I couldn't have imagined this at the time because I didn't know what it's like. Not that I could imagine it today, but I imagine if you're a cocaine addict and you knew Tony Montana during the time of Scarface, and he gave you like a key of uncut Peruvian flake, and you had it in your house. It's kind of like that. Like you couldn't not delve into that stash. That's what having the novelization for The Empire Strikes Back was at the time. I had the music, I had the novelization. This was a bad combination of things to have. This was really, really bad. I mean, it was bad. I couldn't resist the urge. I had to do it. I listened to the record and read the novelization. I listened to the soundtrack. I listened to John Williams' score while I read the novelization. Now, the great thing about it was at the time, it didn't even matter because the fervor was so intense that I didn't even feel I was missing out on something. It was all part of the same continuum. The music still, you could read the scenes, you could kind of figure out where it was going to go, but you couldn't, the music, even though you're reading it, it still wasn't like visualizing it yet. You couldn't, of course, the startling revelation happened, and that was something I couldn't even fathom what I had read in this book. I was like, I couldn't, like, what? Like, I thought that was like something, the book was wrong. That couldn't be the case, couldn't be real. So there I was in front of the UA 150 theater on the corner of 6th and Blanchard at like 7 o'clock in the morning, queuing up, getting in line for The Empire Strikes Back. And this was when everybody first saw Star Wars, there was the kind of like, what are we seeing? What's going on? How could, and then you come out and your worldview is slightly different. Your world literally was rocked. It had been changed. But back then, and I have to set the stage, which something that is not really understood. Sequels, even in 1980, were not exactly considered to be a big thing. Like the sequel to Love Story, which was Oliver's Story, not so good. Jaws 2, as much as I dearly loved it, which had come out when I was in the 5th grade in 78, I loved Jaws 2, but it didn't hold a candle to the first. Damien, Omen 2, which is actually a very respectable sequel. Sequels were not considered to be, there were not franchises. They made sequels. Exorcist 2, The Heretic, we saw how that turned out. Not so good. The Rocky franchise, Rocky 2 is pretty good. Godfather 2, Godfather Part 2, that was a special deal. But sequels were not generally considered to be desirable. So they weren't like kind of what they are now. However, and famously, if you read the history of Empire, of course, Alan Dean Foster had written Splinter of the Mind's Eye, the novel, because George Lucas was interested in furthering the Star Wars franchise, but thought he was going to have to do it much cheaper. So Alan Dean Foster wrote Splinter of the Mind's Eye. And that was considered, and that's the first time you hear about the Kyber crystals and things like that. And if you read, by the way, one of the great making of books of all time is Rinsler's making of book on Empire Strikes Back. Amazing. By the way, Mr. Rinsler's book on the making of Alien recently came out a couple weeks ago. Outstanding. I highly recommend that. And that follows on the heels of his wonderful Planet of the Apes making of book as well. So anyway, the anticipation for Empire Strikes Back, I don't think it would be hard for me to convey just how excited, not just me, but I think the world was. But there was also a little bit of trepidation because how could Empire Strikes Back live up to Star Wars? I mean, how could it? It could. What? How could it? Like I couldn't even imagine. And I was like, because what's really interesting, and this is something I felt that I remember, I was worried that the special effects in Empire Strikes Back weren't going to be as good, because watching the trailers in Star Wars, if you think about it, you've got, of course, the Land Speeder and the Death Star, and then, of course, the battle over the Death Star. But the effects were pretty limited in terms of the kind of environments that they were in. There wasn't as many effects. You think about Star Wars, it's a big effects film. And, of course, we were introduced to blockade runners and Star Destroyers and Land Speeders and X-Wings and the Death Star and the destruction of planets and all that. But if you think about it, the special effects were pretty kind of the same, really. But in Empire, you saw Hoth and asteroid fields and Cloud City. There was all these different environments, Dagobah, that required different kinds of effects. So I remember thinking, what if the effects aren't good? what if they're not as good? Like, how am I going to feel about that? So as excited as I was, the anxiety I felt was tremendous anxiety. I felt just like, what if it wasn't as good? Because Star Wars had completely taken over my life. In addition to Star Trek, with Star Trek the Motion Picture, but Star Trek was always there. It was a constant, never let me down. Star Trek, even after Star Trek the Motion Picture, it brought my Star Trek fandom to a new level. But Star Wars was, remember, there was only one movie, man. There was Star Wars, that was it. Star Wars was perfection. You never really thought you were ever going to get another one. And sequels, not always the best thing in the world, but man, there was anticipation. And the trailers looked amazing. The feel of it, listening to the music, hearing the Imperial March. And then when I read the book, of course, I knew it was awesome. But even the book couldn't convey. You're reading the book, you're reading about the characters, you understand what was going on. I got it. But still, the ending, I'm like, how am I going to feel about it? And I think everyone else felt that way too. And I was with a bunch of people that, this is why I like to go to movies. This is why I want to go to England to see Bond 25. When you exist in a space where you can go to press screenings and all that, there's a different vibe, because when you go to press screenings, and I go to a lot of them, I have for the last like 30 years that I've lived in LA, a lot of press screenings. There's a lot of this, like, maybe it's going to be good. There's a lot of, but the unbridled enthusiasm, I can't wait to see this movie, and you don't get a lot of that, because everyone has to be sort of like jaded and disaffected, even amongst the fan community. But when you see an audience, you get into an audience, like ever since over the last 10 years, when they open movies, especially here in LA, the Thursday night before it actually opens, and you go at 7 o'clock, you can go at 8 o'clock, you can go at 9 o'clock. When you go to like the Cinerama Dome at the ArcLight in Hollywood, you see all your friends, everybody you know, like in the industry, even us middle-aged dudes and dudettes with one foot in our graves, we all go. You go to the ArcLight, they've got a bar and a restaurant there, you have dinner, have a drink, and you go, and it's that opening night. There's even all my friends that can go to press screenings, but they're there too, and you're with the fans. You're with the people that bought a ticket, and the anticipation is just, it's electric, and you can feel it in the auditorium. That's what I love. That's why I want to see Bond 25 at the Odeon Cinema in Leicester Square. And first of all, James Bond is ultimately a British thing, so you got to see it in England. You got to go. He's MI6, man. So anyway, Empire Strikes Back. Seeing Empire Strikes Back was a religious experience. It truly was. It gave believers something more to believe in. Everything about The Empire Strikes Back, I mean, you think about it. You see Star Destroyers, you see probe droids, you see Tauntauns. I mean, other than a Star Destroyer, it was all kind of new, but you'd never seen a Star Destroyer launch a probe droid before. You're seeing the Rebel base. You're seeing snow speeders. The Millennium Falcon doesn't work, and you see our characters. They're in an entirely different environment. Well, I don't need to retrace Empire Strikes Back for you, but let's just say, as a growing boy, moving into adolescence and my teenage years, I mean, going to junior high was tough, hard to navigate that first year. Who are you? What are you? Where are you going to go? But I was being delivered. Remember, this was only 5 months after Star Trek the Motion Picture opened December 7th, 1979. Empire Strikes Back opened in May of 1980. So, I mean, it was a wonderful time. Every 6 months, you were getting an infusion of imagination for all of you imagination connoisseurs. I was blown away. Empire Strikes Back exceeded all of my expectations. It was better than it had any right to be, I guess. The effects, everything about it was absolutely magical. I can't tell you how it left. I spent the entire summer of 1980 going to see Empire Strikes Back. I basically went every weekend. Now, I was working at this time, and I also was flush with bar mitzvah cash, so it didn't matter. Like I had lots of cash. I could go down and spend it at Golden Age Collectibles, and I'd have to go though. I sat in the same seat every single time. First row, left side, 8th seat, first row, left side. balcony. I mean, the UA 150 was a big open. It was kind of a big open dome, and the balcony was kind of in the middle. So if you sat on the front of the balcony, you were pointed directly at the screen. It was a huge screen. And that's where I always sat there every time. But I was kind of paranoid. I had to get my seat every time. That was my favorite seat to sit in. So I'd always have to be first when I saw it. So on a Saturday or a Sunday, it depended. Because sometimes if I worked on a Saturday, I'd have to go on a Sunday. But I would get up and I would take the bus down and I'd get my friends to go. And I'd have different groups of friends go with me on various days. And we'd get there and I'd be like, oh, I got to get there at like 9 a.m. because I figured you get there. Nobody was lining up 3 hours early, especially after it had been playing. So that's what I would do. I would put groups of people together like, hey, man, you want to come see Empire? And I would go see it every weekend. I saw it 26 times. 26 times I saw it at the UA 150 theater. And at 13, man, what was interesting was this idea that a sequel to Star Wars, like I never believed it would ever not rock my world. And indeed, it certainly didn't. I mean, it was one of those things where it lived up to every expectation, every hope and dream. And I would dream about this and ponder what was going to happen. And man, did I love that movie. I never got tired of watching it at the UA 150. Never got tired of watching it. I mean, I could anticipate. I knew the beats, kind of like how you'd know the silences between tracks on a record when you're playing that soundtrack record. Oh, man. So yeah, I just felt it was time to just start a chat, start a Robservations, and just talk about the Star Wars love, man. The Star Wars love. There was nothing but love, nothing but love for Empire, man. And I want to share my even when I talk about it, I feel it. I'm channeling the love. Can I feel the love today? Yes. And you know what? Every time like online punditry gets me down about Star Wars, I just think back. I think back to Empire. I go out to my garage. I pick up my unbuilt resin 3-foot Star Destroyer that I've had for years that Randy Cooper made. Unlicensed, I know. I understand. Makes me want to build it. Seeing, I got to tell you, Rise of Skywalker, seeing those, I guess, the Age of Rebellion. They should have called it the Age of Empire, but I get it. So seeing the Age of Rebellion era Star Destroyers, like what, 200 of them, makes me want to go build my canonical 3-foot Randy Cooper resin Star Destroyer model, or at least find the fiber optics that I'm going to pretend that I'm going to one day put in. I should just build it, hold you guys to it. But anyway, what reminded me of this too, I wanted some Star Wars love. And you know what? One of you guys, Ian Samuels, did not let me down. Ian Samuels, Imagination Connoisseur Ian Samuels, sent a letter to the website, came over the transom, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to read this letter because I want to remember the Star Wars love. And all it's in all of our hearts. It's in all of our hearts. It is. And Empire Strikes Back, I mean, we all love Star Wars. But Star Wars could have been a one-off. There was no franchise. We never knew if we were going to get. I mean, remember, the thing we got after Star Wars was the holiday special. I mean, B. Arthur, Harvey Korman, Life Day, Itchy, and Mala. I was like, come on, man. Anyway, but we did get Boba Fett. But seeing Empire Strikes Back, it just solidified lifelong love of Star Wars right there. So anyway, this letter comes from Ian Samuels. Ian Samuels writes, Rob Meister General, enough of the talk and the pre-hate for a film we haven't seen yet. Star Wars Episode 6, The Empire Strikes Back. Instead, let's go back to why Empire is not only the best Star Wars film, but one of the best films ever. Vader, now that he knows that the son of Skywalker exists, finding him has become his obsession, sending probes out across the galaxy to find the rebels. Before we rejoin our heroes, a group that has already been established in our hearts, Luke, Han, and Leia, but then Luke is taken by the Wampa, splitting up our group of heroes, but allows the film to show us character growth of Han as he is willing to sacrifice himself. See, they're into it too. Elizabeth has clients today, and they come and they visit. Hey, guys. You know what? I think this is just a clever ploy for cookies. Do you guys want cookies? Hey, cookies? Gilbert, come here. You want cookies? Oh, come on. Let's see. I got cookies. You want a cookie? See? Are you going to share the Empire love? See, you're too distracted. You want another one? Now, look at this. I could have called him Wampa, but I didn't. But doesn't he? I mean, he even looks like a Wampa. Are you like a Wampa?
You sure like a Wampa, buddy? Oh, yes.
Yeah, no, Tallulah didn't get down, Gilbert, down. You got to let your sister have up. Here, come on. Tallulah, come here. Tallulah, nope. Come here. Tallulah, come here. Come here. Tallulah, come here. Come on. Nope. Let Tallulah come up, Tallulah.
Yes, Tallulah. Now you get one too. Yes, that's fair.
Have another one. Have another one.
That's right. You don't look like a Wampa. Maybe you look like an Ewok.
Like Wicket. Okay, Tallulah, it's time to get down. I know. Put those away.
Yes.
Get down. Okay, you two. Oh, you stepped on my headphones. Don't do that. Anyway, yeah. Okay, there. I've interrupted the show. Tallulah is on my headphone cables. You got to let the headphone cables go. All right. Anyway, back to my reverie about Empire Strikes Back and this letter. No, you guys. See, they do that. I think it's a clever ploy. But you know what? They're part of the show, right? They're part of the show. You got to have Gilbert and Tallulah. They got to come in. Anyway, where was I? But then Luke is taken by the Wampa, splitting up our group of heroes, but allows the film to show us the character growth of Han as he is willing to sacrifice himself for his friend. Through this difficulty, the group is brought together again, but Han needs to leave. He still owes Jabba money, suggesting that the group is about to be broken up again, but the Empire attacks. The rebels successfully escape despite the odds, but once again, the group is split as Luke goes off to Dagobah to find Yoda. The cutting between Han and Leia on the Falcon escaping from the Empire, including the asteroid field, and Luke finding Yoda and beginning his training builds the suspension for both journeys. As we see Luke training, we know how important it is for him to get on with it, as his friends are in trouble. Then when Luke has his vision of his friends in pain, it adds to the drama as we return to Han and Leia in Cloud City, knowing that Luke has seen that they're going to be in pain soon. All during this, Han and Leia's love builds. Then when Luke is on his way to Cloud City, the group is being brought back together again for Han to be sealed in carbonite and taken off by Boba Fett. Luke and Vader's duel is very telling, and even this has storytelling in it. Vader is at first seen as just toying with Luke, using just a one-handed grip, as a less trained Luke uses a double-handed grip on his blade. Vader gets to get a hint of Luke's potential as he escapes the trap leading from the carbonite pit. Now, you know what? I'm going to interrupt this letter. There are so many things in Empire from a filmmaking standpoint that deftly conveyed, I guess you'd call it awesomeness. And that was one of those things. The Luke Vader duel it's almost like a symphony that it has different movements. And it first starts out where you are beaten. You know, Vader has it all over Luke, but Luke finds the strength. But when you see Vader wielding his lightsaber one-handedly, you're like, oh, Luke is down. And then, of course, Luke gets angry, and then Vader starts using his force powers. He's not even bothering anymore. He's just flinging stuff at Luke, and Luke is just getting battered. He must be bleeding internally. That kind of drama, the drama in that lightsaber duel, it was totally basically what it was a subjugation. Vader was completely taking Luke apart, and it was so well done. It wasn't just an action scene. The whole thing was character, and it was amazing. And throughout that, the asteroid field sequence, I mean, it wasn't just the stories, but it was the story that was being told, but the set pieces, it all worked together. And I've always maintained, I've said this often, I've said that I do believe that The Empire Strikes Back is the finest fantasy film ever made. Even though it's the Star Wars sequel, there's philosophy in it, there's action adventure in it, there's romance, there's war, there is an internal struggle, an Oedipal. Well, I mean, not really Oedipal, because that would be mother. It's different than Oedipal. But there's the father-son battle, and all of that is so well done. It's great storytelling throughout. And I don't think that, look, there's a lot of people that like Star Wars movies for various reasons, but in terms of a movie, now someone will always go, but it doesn't have an ending. It ends on a cliffhanger. But it really doesn't end on a cliffhanger. Yeah, it leaves a plot thread dangling, which is, we got to go to Han Solo. But the film ends on a very definitive note when Vader, it's really all about Luke's destruction, his innocence. It's a story of innocence lost. And by the end of the film, I mean, if the movie was made in the 70s by Martin Scorsese and it came out, it would have just ended on that note where Luke is totally disenfranchised and his life is like at a crossroads and nothing he believed was true. Obi-Wan Kenobi's been lying to him. And it would have ended, and that would have been it. And people would have been the message of the movie would be like, yeah, life is never what you think it's going to be, and you're always going to get screwed in the end, and everything you know is wrong. And that would have been the way it would have ended. The fact that it ended on a hopeful note, where they couldn't end a Star Wars movie that way, but if you think where that movie actually goes, it's incredible that it goes in the direction that it does go. And sure, you're left with has taken a bath or a shower by the end of the film and maybe got a little cleaned up and Luke has his hand fixed, but it's not like the rest of the movie hadn't happened. It was pretty definitive and it was pretty much a rout, and it was really, really, as far as the story goes, it was so satisfying on so many levels. But sorry, I'll get back to this letter. At the end, we have a downbeat feeling that Han is lost and the group is broken. But at the same time, there is still hope. We see the rebel fleet massing to face the Empire and Lando's promise they will get Han back. We believe that the team will get back together again, and we are left believing that they will save Han and that they have a chance against the Empire. Empire is a great example of perfect, well-paced storytelling. I watched the Star Wars films with my wife, who is not a fan, but she admitted Empire was a good film. Do you agree? Well, Ian Samuels, let me ponder that question for a moment. Do I agree? I love Empire Strikes Back. It's one of my favorite movies ever made. I feel that in all of the online vitriol and that we're spewing, and I've often been guilty of it myself. But I think, you know what? Sometimes we got to spread the love. We got to talk about, why are we in this game in the first place? What is it about these movies that turn us on? Why is our moderator, Greg Smith, even now building a 1-to-1 scale snowspeeder? You know why? Because I dare say snowspeeders were just as cool as X-Wings, because the Battle of Hoth was rad. It was rad. I mean, it was fighting against, I understand they lost. They got routed. The rebels were routed by the Imperial forces, but snowspeeders, I mean, it was funny. I'd seen paintings and maybe in the trailers, and I was kind of in the novelization, you get a sense of it all. But it wasn't until the sound that they made, the sound when they were like taking off in the hangar deck or the hangar bay, everything about Empire. I mean, look, people can say those aren't exactly practical machines, and the fact that they can be taken out by rebel snowspeeders, that was a fluke. They didn't know they were going to do that. It was a fluke. They figured that shit out in the course of battle. Remember the old adage, even the best battle plan never survives contact with the enemy. There was so much imagination, the twin pod cloud cars. I mean, there was so much in Empire. Remember the first time. First of all, let's go back. Let's talk about the Imperial March. Let's talk about hearing the Imperial March. And you first see those Star Destroyers. And like we saw one. We saw one in Star Wars. We saw one at the beginning of Empire. But when that Imperial March plays and you see a fleet of Imperial Star Destroyers and then they drop the Super Star Destroyer on you, kabam, 20 miles long. Not 20 feet. It dwarfs the Star Destroyers. That shit was just like, come on, man. That was so exciting. It was so cool. Bounty hunters, the Slave One. I mean, whoever thought that an iron You know, I looked at my mom's iron after that in a totally different way. I'd pick up the iron and fly the iron around the house because I didn't have a Slave One toy yet. I mean, there was so much to love in this movie, and so good. Anyway, I just want to talk about that. I figured let's spread some love, man. Let's talk some Star Wars, sweet, sweet, sweet love, because we don't talk about it. When was the last time you heard about some sweet, sweet Star Wars love? Well, today. I want everyone to say, you know what? The Empire Strikes Back made sweet, sweet love to me when I was a young lad or a young lass. And it certainly did, damn it. Wade O'Neill says, saw Free Enterprise on the streaming platform Tubi, which is free but has ads. It was fun. If you had Pym particles, what advice would you give younger Rob about filmmaking or the business thereof? Very good question, Wade. When we were making Free Enterprise, I mean, it was such a whirlwind, amazing thing that happened. It's never happened since, where all the planets aligned. It was a little crazy. We got the movie financed. And I was certainly not in a position to, I wish I was in a more professional mindset when we made it, but it was such an amazing experience, and we were such fanboys, and we couldn't believe. I wish I'd heard my own advice. I wish I'd watched Robservations and heard me say, remember, it's not show friends, it's show business. And it's not what you deserve, it's what you negotiate, because both of those things would have served me well. Also, another thing I would have told young Rob about Free Enterprise, and it would have made it a much better film, I think, is Mark and I, who had written the script, we were so entranced or just, we were so proud of ourselves. I was editing the film. I am not one of those people that thinks a director shouldn't edit his own movies. I will say this, though. This was the first movie I had made, the first movie I directed, and we were just too in love with it. Like, watching every frame, every scene, every take, we were watching the footage, and it was so amazing that we'd even made this. So I would just sit there, and I was not able to, and part of it was a budgetary thing too. Paying an editor would have cost a lot more money. I wasn't being paid as an editor. I was getting a weekly paycheck, but it wasn't a lot because we had to put everything into the movie. I wish now, I look at Free Enterprise, if I can ever get the movie back, I would actually do an entirely new cut of the film. Now, I wouldn't be that different. Most people wouldn't notice it, but it would be a much better movie. I could make the film a much better film in terms of pacing and tighten it up. But at the time we were so, I mean, imagine, it's akin to, there's a movie that was directed by Wim Wenders, who directed Wings of Desire, called Until the End of the World. And I'm hoping to get there's a 5-hour version of it that Bill Hunt was able to record. It was streamed on a channel. I really want to see it. But in Until the End of the World, there was a device that was developed where you could actually record your dreams and play them back. You could watch your dreams. And it was incredibly addictive. And people are like, they would just sit and watch their dreams all day because it was so, can you imagine if you could actually watch your dreams? Well, that's kind of exactly what it was like after filming Free Enterprise and looking at the footage. It was like seeing your dreams. I mean, these things that we had literally made up. I mean, a lot of it was based on real experiences. So I lived it, put it down on the page, filmed it, and then you're looking at this finished footage. I mean, I'm looking at footage of William Shatner saying words that I wrote in ways that I told him to say them. And it was strange. So I didn't have enough. I wasn't able to, and I had edited feature films. This was not my first feature film that I had edited. And I wasn't able, it wasn't that I was detached, but it was, even if somebody else had been editing the movie, it would have been the same thing. I would have stopped them, and it was just a weird experience. And now I have enough distance where I could go in, and I was afforded the opportunity to go change the cut of the movie back in 2006. But even then, I still didn't see ways to cut it as much as I wanted to. What I really want to do is I want to get the negative, get access to the negative, and do a complete revamp of the film and make it out in 4K and make it future-proof and get it done. But I appreciate you enjoyed it. And it was a great experience. I wouldn't change it for the world. I learned so much. It was amazing. Chief DeMac, I always say Chief. It's Chef Mac. Chef Mac. Hey, Rob, took your advice and checked out the Omega Man and Zardoz. What was that like? That would have been so much fun to sit around with you and watch those and hear what you said after you saw them. Thanks for the recommendation. Just received my Blu-ray box of all of the Bond films. So that's my viewing tonight. See you in London. Well, Chef, I always say Chef, good luck on that. Report back. I don't know if you've seen all the Bond films. I'll be very curious to hear your impressions as you move through the films. Jeffrey Mao says, Star Wars, like your first time going up the shirt. It's kind of what it was like. Absolutely. I normally stay away from sexual subjects on this show, but, it's hard because my other favorite thing in life, besides being an imagination connoisseur, has always been women. Chris Parsons says, since James Gunn's Suicide Squad movie won't be titled Suicide Squad 2, and Nathan Fillion is now on board, over or under 50% we get a Green Lantern cameo like we did with Batman and Flash. Huh. I never thought about that. That's, I think that's kind of a stretch, but Green Lantern, I don't know. I'm going to say under. We might get other DC Universe cameos, but I don't know about Green Lantern. Because it's James Gunn and knowing his sensibility, I bet if we're going to get any DC Universe cameos, they might be a little different than Green Lantern. Stubble McShave says Empire was financed by Lucas and was technically an independent movie. That is true. The gamble almost ruined him, but its success secured his freedom from the studios. Yes, and if you read Rinsler's making of book, what's fascinating about Empire? It had gone wildly over budget. I mean, they made it ultimately, it was about a $20 million film, which now people are like, what? That's pocket change. But at the time, it was very expensive, and it was almost double the budget. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And Lucas, to this day, Empire Strikes Back is not his favorite movie. And what happened was they weren't going to be able to make payroll. And believe it or not, nobody would give George Lucas a loan to make payroll. So it was Gary Kurtz who went to I think it was the Bank of Boston that he had a previous relationship with. And it was the Bank of Boston, if memory serves, who loaned him the money to make payroll to finish Empire. 20th Century Fox said, hey, we'll give you the money, but you have to give us back those sweet, sweet merchandising rights that Lucas had retained. One of the greatest, when I always say, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. One of the greatest things anybody in Hollywood ever did was when George Lucas said to 20th Century Fox, I'd really like to retain the merchandising rights for the film. And the Fox was like, whatever. And he's like, yes, I'd like to do posters and T-shirts. There was never anything lucrative like Star Wars from a marketing standpoint. So Fox gave up those rights, gave them to Lucas. Boy, was that a smart thing to do. Very smart thing to do. So 20th Century Fox, when they were hitting money problems, because Fox had a deal to release the film, but it was entirely financed by George Lucas, who he'd always been a maverick. He always wanted independence. And that's what Empire ultimately afforded him. But when they weren't going to be able to make payroll, 20th Century Fox tried to get Lucas to give up those merchandising rights. Lucas was not, he's no stupid man. So he didn't do that. Gary Kurtz was able to finance the film. But the reasons Empire went, there's a lot of reasons. But I mean, they were shooting on a glacier in Norway when terrible weather hit. I mean, there was just a lot of things going. It wasn't because of incompetence. It was just a big movie. The Richard is here. The Richard says, aloha, Rob. What are films that you watched multiple times in a row? Batman 89, Near Dark, and Nightbreed come to mind for me. The first movie I ever watched in a row, once right after, I watched it twice immediately, was A Clockwork Orange, which is still one of my very favorite movies of all time. It was one of those movies I had read about in a lot of science fiction, pictorial histories of science fiction. I've talked a lot about Alan Frank's book, Sci-Fi Now, which came out in the wake of Star Wars, and how I vowed to watch every movie that was cited in Alan Frank's Sci-Fi Now. I have, except one movie. I've told that story. And Clockwork Orange was always shown in these films because in the 70s, there was a lot of different science fiction films that were coming out, a lot of different kinds of movies, and they weren't just a lot of them were dystopian movies, so they were earthbound, whether it was everything from The Final Program to The Ultimate Warrior to Soylent Green to The Omega Man to Rollerball to Zardoz, Logan's Run, Boy and His Dog. A lot of these movies, so they were all these science fiction films were in these books. So Clockwork Orange was a movie I was not Stanley Kubrick. I knew he directed 2001. That was about it. I don't think when I was 13, I had seen other films other than 2001 yet. I hadn't become a Kubrick acolyte. And after that, there were so many movies to watch. I'd become such a movie fan. I didn't watch movies back to back, like 2 times in a row. I'd watch them over multiple days, but I think your question is like, maybe when I got a videotape and like I'd watch a movie many, many times over the course of trying to copy it for me or a friend or something. So it wasn't unusual for me to watch a film 3 or 4 or 5 times when I would rent it. And I would. But in terms of watching, I watched Clockwork Orange for the first time. I was so blown away by it. I rewound it and watched it again right away. And recently I did that again a number of years ago, I don't know how many years ago, with Gaspar Noé's Enter the Void. I watched that twice back to back. I was like stunned by that movie. But for the most part, I haven't done that. But that's a good question. James Bonner says, yep, I read the novel to Empire as well back in the day. No shame, my friend. No shame. I know, right? How could you not? How could you not? You have that book in your possession. How can you not watch, or how can you not read the book? Willow Yang is here. Oh my God. Willow Yang says, after watching The Next Generation's Manhunt, I want to see Worf hook up with the I don't even how the creature, the Antidine, The Shape of Water with Klingons. Yes, that's right, Manhunt with Mick Fleetwood, a Fleetwood Mac. Yes, that would be I don't want to ruin the surprise for you. But yes, that's very funny. I'm sorry, man. I promise you, Willow, when you get to the 3rd season of Next Generation, it'll be all worth it. Stubble McShave says, it's hard to kill your darlings when writing. Stubble, you are absolutely right. Absolutely right. This next letter comes from Dean. I'm going to mispronounce his name just because it's fun. He always laughs. Mikatich? Mysatich? Mixelplick? Anyway, Dean is here. Dean is a longtime member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, and he's written a number of letters. Here's another one. Hi, Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity. I keep hearing that we are in the midst of the streaming wars, with American studios trying to catch up with Netflix and Amazon with their own streaming services to get in on that piece of the action. This is great, as we're getting lots of what will hopefully be great entertainment, with Disney announcing a bunch of MCU spin-off series and Star Wars shows being on Disney+, The Mandalorian kicking things off on November 12th. But how long will this last for? In the States, you already have Netflix, Amazon, CBS All Access, and Hulu, and maybe a few others I never heard of. However, you have Disney+, which will be an additional cost to current Hulu subscribers. Apple, Universal, and Warner Brothers are also planning to launch their own streaming services, which no doubt will have a price tag attached to them. I find it hard to believe that people will be willing to subscribe to all of these streaming services, as the costs for all of them will build up and most likely cost more than a cheap or mid-range cable subscription. With this in mind, I can see 2 things happening. The smaller streaming services like CBS All Access will not be able to last long and will likely start selling their shows to the independent streaming services like Netflix or Amazon, or someone will be able to come up with a deal with the different streaming services so that by subscribing to their service, you can have access to everything for one price, going back to the bad old days of cable services. This can't be a good thing for those that are living in North America, or maybe it is, but for those of us living outside the States, this is a great time, as these streaming services, as far as I know, currently don't have plans to extend beyond the States. This means that the content made for the US streaming services will end up on one of 2 platforms, which are Netflix or Amazon. And in all likelihood, it will be Netflix, as this is currently more popular than Amazon. And well, it is for Europe. I can't say for the rest of the world. So while the studios fight it out on who will be king of the streamers in the States and creating great content along the way, all I can say is at this moment in time, no matter who comes out on top, we, the consumer, win. As your channel has been on a Star Wars kick. Hold on now. As your channel has been on a Star Wars kick lately, I will leave with a bad dad joke. What is a Jawa's favorite? What is a Jawa's favorite drink? Martini. That's terrible. Well, Dean, thank you for that dad joke, and thank you for this letter. A good point. You know, the streaming wars have. It's going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen with all of these streaming services. Yes, I mean, Netflix is obviously worldwide, and they do big business in countries like India. So I don't think Netflix is going to necessarily go anywhere, but they're heavily in debt right now. They're leveraged to the hilt. They expected a certain kind of business model to work. I don't know if it will. With the amount of money they're spending, I don't know if their growth and their new subscribers are going to be able to sustain them. I think they're going to be in a world of hurt, and their value is going to be diminished, but I don't think they're going to disappear. But they are going to have to figure out new ways to compete in the marketplace, I think. And they need to do a better job promoting their shows. They really do. I still turn on Netflix. I'm like, what? You know, Disney Plus, just the little bit I've seen, like they have a Star Wars page. You go to the Star Wars page on Disney Plus, there's the Star Wars movies. Like I said, I've talked about this before. How great is that? I mean, if I want to watch the end 30 minutes of Rogue One clip, there I can. If I want to watch the Death Star battle and compare and contrast that with Rogue One, I can just do that. I can zip around. It's all right there. You know, Netflix, you got to hunt and peck and search and figure out and this, that, and the other thing. I mean, it'd be great if something like Netflix would be like, oh, time travel movies. And they had like the 20 best time travel movies. Or it was more like Goodreads or something. You could, it's just, I think they need to do more to promote their content. And they're actually going to be doing that. They're going to be like, what's new this week? I've always maintained that Netflix should have some kind of a weekly magazine show. Like, I don't understand why Netflix doesn't do an Entertainment Weekly or Entertainment Tonight just for Netflix and talk to their showrunners and talk to their I mean, why is it that I have to go to all these different places to watch long form interviews with whether it's David Fincher or Jonathan Goff, anybody who's in these shows? I would think Netflix would have these magazine show just to promote their own stuff. I mean, there's so much there, you don't even know what's there. But I don't think Netflix, they don't think yet that that's necessarily important. But I think it is. I think they should do more of that. But Dean, you're right. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be really interesting. I think Disney offering an ESPN and Hulu bundle along with Disney Plus is the way to go. But you know what? If people end up paying as much for these streaming services as they do for cable, basic cable, it's going to be problematic. Nobody wants to spend money for 8 different streaming services. And I think there is going to be some kind of consolidation. I don't know how that's going to work, but ultimately what it really comes down to is streaming services are going to live and die based on their content. Ultimately, that's it. I think Disney Plus is going to, every parent who has children is going to get Disney Plus. And they're going to stick with it because Disney Plus is going to make more shows. I mean, who isn't going to watch that Jeff Goldblum show, The World According to Jeff Goldblum, where whatever he's interested in, you're going to go find out? I mean, to me, one of the things that I love about this show is when I was doing the interviews for Star Trek The Next Generation, the Blu-rays, I remember telling some of the actors, especially like Patrick Stewart, like, I don't want to talk to you about Star Trek. And they'd be like, what? And I'm like, yeah, what do you really know about Star Trek? I mean, if somebody was going to ask you about the geopolitical situation between the Klingons and Romulans during the Klingon Civil War of the 4th season of TNG, what could you tell me? And I would get these blank stares. They would laugh. I'm like, you don't know. The viewers do. But what the viewers don't know is they don't know about you. And they don't want you to tell them about your character. They know about your character. They want to know about you. And so that's how I would build up. By the way, that's how I approach all of my celebrity interviews. Is you get people talking about themselves and their philosophy and what they believe in. And that's why long form shows on say YouTube, when Joe Rogan sits down with somebody and it's a 2.5 hour interview, people love that because they get a sense of what other people really are and what they're really all about. And when you watch somebody, certainly watching these chat shows, there's not a lot, there's not many stones uncovered when it comes to me. If you like me, you watch these shows. If you think I'm a monumental douche canoe, you don't. So I think that's what long form shows are all about. Interviews are all about. I would like to see those kinds of a deep dive with David Fincher talking about Mindhunter. Make it 2.5 hours. You know, I don't understand. And whenever they promote a show, the kids from Stranger Things, like what's it like being a kid and then coming back and doing Stranger Things? You know, I'd be curious to. People have to promote their content more, but the content is king. It's going to make everybody live and die. We shall see. Apple certainly has a lot of money to throw at some really quality content, and like HBO is always like HBO they don't do a ton of content, but the content they do is really high quality, and they get really great people involved. Apple's going to do the same thing. I can see Apple following that HBO model. They might not have as much content as say Netflix, but the content they have, all of it's going to be worth watching, all of it. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it all shakes out. I don't quite know. I don't want to, like you, I don't think we should be paying 70 or 80 or 90 bucks a month for all these different streaming services. I'll tell you another thing. For someone like myself who really cares about the quality of presentation, I mean, you know, to me, the smallest TV set you should ever be watching is 65 inches. A 65-inch TV set with Dolby Atmos or Dolby Surround. One of the reasons I couldn't stand CBS All Access at first, when I first started, I'm like, this app sucks. You know, then I started watching Star Trek Discovery through Amazon because I could get it streaming through Amazon and not necessarily using their app. And their streaming was better. So it's really it's a combination. So we'll see. It's a good question, though. I don't know where it's all going to wind up, but the streaming wars have begun, and how that's all going to work is going to be very, very interesting to see how that shakes out. We shall see. Myth Dustards said, I want Willow Yang's review of Q Who. That is, of course, the second season episode where the Borg are first introduced. You know, of season 2, I think I would be most interested in Willow Yang's review of Q Who and also Measure of a Man. But I don't think Willow is watching the Blu-rays, so she can't watch the extended version of Measure of a Man. That's 13 minutes longer, but it would be interesting to find out. Cardinal Sin says, who has read Han Solo at Star's End? I have. Brian Daly wrote a Han Solo trilogy, and there was a Han Solo trilogy, and there was a Lando Calrissian trilogy. The Lando books had more. The Lando Han. I don't remember all the titles of Han Solo at Star's End, but there was a Lando Calrissian book called Lando Calrissian and the Flame Winds of Ocean. What a cool title! But yeah, there was a trilogy, and they were some of the earliest after Splinter of the Mind's Eye. I think they were the first. Well, at least the Han Solo books were the first Star Wars books after Splinter of the Mind's Eye, original Star Wars books. I love those books. I thought they were great. The Richard says, "What is a film which doesn't have to? What is a film which doesn't have a decent one already? Would you like to play as a game, a board game, a card game, an RPG, or a video? Any genre? Which film? Well, it'd have to be something that I'd have to be a film that I would think would lend itself well to the gaming format. That hasn't already been turned into a game, I guess. That's a good question. I'd have to think about that. I don't know. That's a good question, because I keep thinking about games like I have tabletop games like I have a sealed version of the Dawn of the Dead tabletop game that came out in the very late 70s, early 80s. There's so many games that have already been turned into, you know, The Thing. I would say The Thing, but that's been turned into, like, make it like Secret Hitler. If you guys haven't ever played the game Secret Hitler, I love that game. It's a great game for parties. The Richard says, plus there's already signs of overload. You only have so many hours to dedicate. It's not logical to have so many services. Yeah, that might be true. I mean, look, we are drowning in a sea of content, and all of it's going to shake out. All of it's going to shake out, and what's interesting is it's not just like I read books, when's that Stephen King Tastiness, The Institute coming out? It's not just that. It's not just TV. It's comics. It's books. It's model kits. There's Gundam Perfect Grade kits to be built. There's so much to do that it's really hard. I mean, it's really tough to say. I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna have to table your question about games. I gotta think about that. Here's another great letter. This letter comes in from Jeffrey Mao, writing a lot. Jeffrey Mao's been writing a lot to the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is another good letter. Jeffrey writes, "Good morning, good afternoon, good night, Rob. After yesterday's Robservations 208, I wanted to thank you for reading my letter and hearing your thoughts on it. I don't know if other members of the Post-Geek Singularity, other imagination connoisseurs, have had the same thoughts, but this is, without a doubt, the first and only online community that I've ever felt a true kinship with. I think because we are all so, well, eerily similar. For example, you remind me a lot of myself, obviously, but also a lot like my older cousin who is a year older than you are. Since we were both only kids, he was like my older brother growing up. My main regret is that we live so far away now, he living in California, but he was my geek inspiration. I got the Franz Joseph technical manual from him, untold number of comic books, my first VHS copy of the original trilogy, and much else. I used to love going over to his home as a kid and looking at his room, and he had old Battlestar Galactica models and posters and all of that. He did try and parlay his geekery into a profession as a comic book artist. His major claim to fame was drawing an issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think it was an annual, not the main series, and it was quite good. He's been working in the video game industry in one capacity or another for 30 years, so I guess you could say he actually did turn his geekery into a job. One other thought I had as I was writing this letter was a good topic for a show would be reminiscing about the things that we've lost that we wish we'd kept. I heard your story about losing your storage with all the goodies in there. Oh, it was a 10 by 10 storage locker. And while I never had that happen to me, there's a lot of stuff that I just don't have anymore. I had Pulp Fiction Laserdiscs, Terminator, The Abyss, Alien, the original trilogy, all on LD, and I don't know whatever happened to them. I've got mine. In terms of books, my greatest regret was somehow losing the illustrated screenplays to Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The other book that had also somehow disappeared was Star Wars: The Magic of Myth, which I bought at the National Air and Space Museum back in 1994. I believe when there was a special Star Wars exhibit there. It was a cool book that detailed the historical, cultural, and mythological influences on Star Wars. It's probably way out of print, but it looks like you can buy it on eBay. Finally, Willow Yang mentioned Stephen Jay Gould in her letter, and it got me thinking about him. He was also one of my favorite science authors, and I've read many of his books, even if I didn't necessarily understand all of it. I have his last published book, The Structure of Evolutionary Theory, which is a suitably massive tome. He wrote it while he was in poor health, and he died soon after. It's a shame that we lost him so early because he would have been able to lend his eloquent, erudite, still yet very relatable voice to the evolution debates. I dare say if he were still alive, I don't think things would be as they are now. He was an ardent champion of evolution and would have argued strongly against opponents of it, but also his continuing research and publications would have added to our knowledge and understanding. He was like Neil deGrasse Tyson before the internet, and he is sorely missed. Thanks, Jeffrey Mao. Jeff M. Jeff, once again, another great letter. Thank you for that. I think you can't be a geek. You can't be, or let's change it to imagination connoisseur, without thinking about what we lost, what we had as kids that we just don't have anymore. When we were kids, you're not thinking about keeping things in mint condition as much as you might today or saving them. I used to hate getting scratches on my die-cast Dinky or Corgi toys. They used to drive me nuts. I hated that. But it would happen. One of the things that, this is so random, I guess, but when I went to the Air and Space Museum for the first time, I want to say it was 1979, They actually had a poster of Starfleet headquarters from the Franz Joseph Technical Manual. It was very retro, but it was Starfleet headquarters. And it was a painting, and underneath they had a scout that was also from the Franz Joseph Technical Manual. It was vertical, and it was like this, and then the scout was underneath. The scout it has a saucer section like a Constitution class ship, but it only has one warp nacelle in place of where the secondary hull goes on a Constitution class ship. And this was all detailed in the Franz Joseph Technical Manual. And I had bought that poster, and I had it on my wall for the longest time. And I don't know if I sometimes my parents, because I was putting tacks in the wall, which drove my mom insane. In my bedroom, they actually put a cork, not cork board, but a cork-like substance that was a really nice shade of blue. They put it on one wall of my bedroom, and my mom has a picture of this, my bedroom with all this stuff up there, but I put all my posters and stuff all over there. And like when I'd had a Star Trek calendar, and when the year was done, I'd cut out the each month picture and put them on the wall. I had that poster from the Franz Joseph Starfleet headquarters. And I don't know if sometimes when you lean against the wall and there's a poster hanging there, you tear it off the wall by accident. Something like that happened to the poster. I have never seen that poster ever again anywhere. As a matter of fact, I've talked to Doug Drexler. I've asked him about this. Nobody has been able to see this poster. I can't even confirm it exists. I know it exists because I had it on my wall. And to speak to that as well, the cutaway drawing of the Enterprise from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, they did a smaller version, but the actual real version that says Star Trek: The Motion Picture in the corner, I had the cutaway of that and the cutaway of the Next Generation, the Enterprise D, and they were hanging in my apartment in 88 and 89 when I first moved to LA, and there was an earthquake, and they both came off the wall because they were framed under glass, and they were both scratched. And those are things I'd love to get back. But there's so much stuff in my past. I could give you, I could go do a whole show of everything I've lost, but I don't think you can be an imagination connoisseur without remembering things that you wish you would have. But that's the great thing about the world we live in. I guarantee you, the only thing I've never been able to find again that I really want, I had a very rare, beautiful 12-inch figure of Inframan from the Super Inframan that I had in my storage locker. That's probably the only thing I couldn't replace, no matter how much money I had, because it was, from how I understood it, I bought it in like 2004. There was like some rich Hong Kong businessman that had them made, had these Inframan figures, and then another one of the skeleton face warriors that Princess Dragon Mom made. And I ordered one because I love Inframan so much. I can't get that. I saw one on eBay once for like $1,500. Somebody needs to make, like, I don't understand why a Hong Kong company or even an unlicensed company doesn't make another Inframan figure. But I wish I had that. I wish I had that. This is a funny letter. I love this letter. Actually, I'm going to hang on. I'm going to see what anybody has to say in the chat, but this is a good letter. Cardinal Sin says, sorry if this has already been a subject, RMB, but how about Mindhunter? I thought season 2 went into the stratosphere. I really liked it. Did you? I adore Mindhunter. I love season 2. I have been talking about it a lot, actually. The acting is unbelievable. And as I've told people, I am a sucker for serial killer stories. I'm a sucker for police procedurals of any kind. I love forensics. I love detective work. I've often thought, I've actually had thoughts of joining the police force to become a detective, but you'd have to be a cop. You'd have to either be a beat cop or work your way up to detective. And, if I got just fed up with working in Hollywood, I would love to go be a police detective, to be honest. I mean, maybe I'll do that. I've always wanted to do that. Detective Jim, I got one of our great moderators was a retired police detective. But, I'd love to be I want to be like Detective Somerset in 7. maybe not as jaded and as disaffected as he was. But you know what? I think it'd be interesting. You know, if you became a police detective later in life, like around 60, by the time you were so disillusioned and burnt out with the horrors that mankind perpetrates against other men or women, I would be close to death anyway. So, you know, but I loved Mindhunter. I thought it was so good. And start having read serial killer books, things like By Reason of Insanity and Red Dragon when they first came out. That was when behavioral sciences was new. And Mindhunter is a movie where there's no action. It's just people sitting. Even when the serial killer's in it, you don't see serial killers kill anybody. They just talk about it in their room, a room in the prison they're housed in. I mean, I loved Mindhunter. It's just so well made. It's so great. Love it, love it, love it. And so I thought season 2 was as good, if not better, than season 1. I really did. Wade O'Neill asks a pretty good question. How did you end up becoming a DVD special features guy? What was your entry point? It's a shame streaming won't offer these types of bonuses yet. That's a good question. Well, first of all, I started working in home video when I was 13 in 1980, and I worked as a retailer from 1980 in through college through 1988, and then I moved to California, and I started working in the film business after I finished in film school. And then I immediately started working. And when I was working, I just started doing everything. After I worked at Warner Brothers, of course. I worked at talent agencies. But as a filmmaker, I was making, with Peter Billingsley and I, we were making short films and music videos and industrials. And I just started honing my craft, making stuff, whatever it was. And then I got into editing feature films, and I was cutting trailers. And the first special features piece that I ever cut was for Full Moon Entertainment. And it was a behind the scenes look at the making of a movie called Spirit of the Night, AKA Huntress. And it was shot in Romania. And Full Moon put the Video Zone magazine, every time they put out one of their movies, sometimes their movies were short, so sometimes less than 90 minutes. And they would put the Video Zone magazine, like these were behind the scenes. It was like it was like special features, but it was done in more of a magazine format. And Full Moon was putting out a movie a month, basically. So there was a lot of this kind of work. And I was working with Dan Schweiger, and I was working with Dave Parker. And Dave Parker, of course, I brought him on. He and I famously worked together on many of the special features that I produced. And then we went on and I produced the horror film, The Hills Run Red, that he directed. But we started our working relationship at Full Moon back in the early 90s. So that's when I first dabbled in behind the scenes stuff. And then the first behind the scenes piece I cut was for my own movie, Free Enterprise. My friend Jeff Goldsmith had shot all the behind the scenes footage, and then I put it together. I cut it together, and that documentary is on the DVD. And because I'd done a lot of editing of all different kinds of things, the way I got into business, a friend of mine named Michael Pellerin, he had a company. He was working with a guy named Phil Savinick, who had a company called TV is OK. And Michael Pellerin and Jeff Curdy, who's from Seattle. Jeff Curdy's worked with Disney for years and years. He's written a lot of books. He most recently wrote a book on Mary Poppins when Mary Poppins Returns came out. They had a company called Curdy Pellerin, and they had been doing all of the Laserdisc box sets. And I had been a fan. The first special features I ever saw were on the Criterion discs that came out in '84, the Laserdiscs of Citizen Kane and King Kong. So I had been a huge Laserdisc aficionado since 1984. So for 15 years, I was looking at audio commentaries and what Criterion had been putting out on Laserdisc. And then in the 90s, Disney had made these beautiful collector box sets that Michael Pellerin and Jeff Curdy had been producing for things like 20,000 Leagues and Tron and things like that. And Michael Pellerin, who I had known just through geek circles, because being in LA in the 90s, if you were in the geekosphere, eventually you ran into everybody. And most of the people that I knew, that I met, whether it's Eric Wallace, my good buddy Eric Wallace, or Dan Beber, or things like that, they all wound up working. And Eric Wallace is running The Flash right now, the Flash TV series. So everybody knew each other. So one day, Michael Pellerin just called me up, and I was actually working at NBC. It was after Free Enterprise came out, and I wasn't. I was going to I was going to going to meetings to do movies, but I hadn't been hired for anything. I almost directed Dude, Where's My Car? It was between me and another guy, and then they decided to make it not an R-rated movie anymore, and they went with the other director, who passed away recently, actually. And Michael called me up and said, "Hey, man, you want to come to work for us?" And they were working primarily on Disney movies, and they needed somebody to do some pickup work on Fantasia. And this was during the transition to DVD. So this was in 2000, and I'm like, "Are you kidding?" So the summer of 2000, I want to say it's the summer of 2000. I was working at NBC full time, so I would go to work at NBC. And I'd work from 9 o'clock at night, or 9 o'clock. I'd work at NBC from 9 o'clock in the morning to usually 7 o'clock at night. Then I drove to Hollywood, and I worked for Michael Pellerin from 8 o'clock at night till 4 in the morning. I'd grab dinner in between, and then I would go to bed and then get up and be at NBC at 9 o'clock. So the summer of 2000, I had 2 full-time jobs, but I took the job with Michael because I was working on the Fantasia, the first Fantasia, the Fantasia anthology, with Fantasia and Fantasia 2000. That was the first special features I worked on after doing the Free Enterprise documentary, but that was my first professional gig. And then the second thing that I did was I worked on The Emperor's New Groove, the 2-disc set for Emperor's New Groove, which was a lot of fun. The special features for that were really cool. And at this time, they were throwing money at DVD special features. So we got to do anything we wanted, really. And then Michael, they did the Toy Story box set that came out, and a lot of the Pixar stuff was all coming our way. And that's when I was able to I did a feature-length documentary on the making of Tron for the 2002 20th anniversary disc. That's actually on the Blu-ray. And what was really interesting, how I got into producing stuff myself, is Michael, we got Lord of the Rings. Curdy Pellerin became the best, I guess the Tiffany. There was a lot of great companies that had sprouted up doing special features. And I don't mean to take away from any other creators, including my friend Charlie de Lauzarica, but there's a lot of really talented DVD producers out there that were working in various capacities. And Curdy Pellerin was exclusively Disney, pretty much. But they had the money, and Disney was we were doing deep dives into their catalog. And then we got Lord of the Rings, because Michael had a connection to New Line, and Michael was the most fanatical Lord of the Rings. I mean, the way I love Star Trek, he loved Tolkien, and he was a complete Tolkien fanatic. And we got Lord of the Rings, which has, to this day, the biggest budget for any special features that were ever created, was for the Lord of the Rings films. And that's, I got to work on those. But once we got that, I got a phone call to do The Usual Suspects. And there was a producer doing The Usual Suspects special edition for MGM that couldn't get Kevin Spacey involved and couldn't get Brian involved. And the head of production at MGM, we had a mutual friend, and was talking to this mutual friend. The mutual friend said, "Oh, well, Rob knows Bryan Singer. They're friends. So maybe Rob could get Brian." So I got a call from MGM, and they basically awarded me the contract to do The Usual Suspects special edition. But I didn't do that until I talked to Brian. I said, "Hey, man, unless you're going to be involved, I don't want to do this." He goes, "Well, if you're doing it, I'll be involved." So I said to Michael Pellerin, I said, "Michael, I'll bring in The Usual Suspects." And he's like, "No, we're doing Disney. We're doing Lord of the Rings. Why don't you just do it in your spare time?" And I'm like, "You're going to allow me to produce the special edition of The Usual Suspects while I'm working for you?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" I was like, "All right." So I started my own company, which was Ludovico Technique. I started Ludovico Technique in 2002, and I started producing special features. And Usual Suspects was very well received, and then I was awarded the contract to do X-Men 1.5 and X2. X2 was the first movie in production that I was able to cover. And I was working on, I mean, it was so insane. After Usual Suspects, MGM liked the special features so much. They said, "Well, what do you want to do next? You can have anything in the catalog that you want." I said, "I want to do To Live and Die in LA and Valley Girl." So Live and Die in LA was already being done by Bud Smith, the editor of the film. So I'm like, all right, well, bummer. And then they gave me Valley Girl. So Dave Parker and I were producing Valley Girl. I was in New Zealand. We were also doing Star Trek 5. I mean, it was just crazy. And it went from there. And then I started specializing in doing big overseas productions. That's how I got Chronicles of Narnia and Superman Returns. I mean, I knew Brian, but Chronicles of Narnia, I was going overseas. Like I would be in New Zealand for months at a time working on Lord of the Rings. I mean, literally months at a time. And then for Chronicles of Narnia, we were in country. We were in New Zealand for 14 months. And then I was in Australia for a year on Superman Returns. So it was crazy. It was great, but that's how I got into it. I mean, here's the problem. The reason why that world will never come around again, and it's sad, but DVDs were the most successful home entertainment device ever. And they penetrated the consumer market very, very quickly. And DVDs, they couldn't make DVDs. They couldn't replicate them fast enough. They were sold for so much money that the studios were making so much money off DVDs. And the thought was that part of the appeal of DVDs were, in fact, the special features. And so from like 1999 to 2008, the DVD world was making special features was incredibly lucrative. The money that I was able to get was huge. I mean, it was enormous. That's how come I was able to go, like a studio would give me a budget that would allow me and a team of people to go live in a foreign country for a year. That's how much money I was getting from studios. I mean, to make these special features, they took it very seriously. I mean, the special features alone for Return of the King were less than $10 million, but up there. I mean, you're talking $6-7 million to special features. This was a lot of money. It was an incredible, and you could become rich. It was a lot of fun. It was a great time. But now they realize that special features really didn't have any bearing ultimately on the format. I've told the story before how it became apparent to me that only 20% of the people who bought DVDs cared about special features. And once the studios realized that, they're like, why are we spending all of this money? I mean, we care, 20% of the film fans care, but 80% don't. And I know everybody here is probably going to say, but I love special features. Of course, that's why you're watching this channel. But for the layman and for most people, they don't care. And now, and what's happened for me is a lot of the people I know, or friends of mine too, have come in and they've made fan documentaries, whether it's Nightmare on Elm Street or Psycho or whatever. There's just no money to spend on special features. Shout Factory, which is still doing some great work. I mean, there are people like Daniel Griffiths who at Ballyhoo Films, he does a great job, but even him, it's still a labor of love. I don't think he's ever going to be able to buy a house, even with the amount of work he does. And when you see the work being done now, you're not getting nearly the amount of money. So it's hard. It's hard to, sometimes, but you still see great special features like Daniel Griffith. Speaking of him, he loves Waterworld. He did a feature-length documentary on Waterworld that's on the Arrow release. And it's great. It's great that, Stubble McShave says, did you read Scoundrels, Ocean's 11, Star Wars style with Han Solo? I did not read Scoundrels, but I love the artwork for it, which I saw, but I haven't read it yet. I will definitely pick that up at some point. I definitely will get that. David Galvez says, hey, RMB, this is completely off topic, but go Bears. I know you're a Seattle fan, but my Bears are primed for a Super Bowl run. Well, good luck. Good luck to the Bears. Chicago, my kind of town. Isn't that what William Buck Rogers said? So good luck to your Bears. Okay, this next letter, I love this next letter. It's pretty funny. This letter comes from CK. CK says, greetings, Rob. This is a short letter and without much controversy, I hope. Regarding your last show, number 208, I think they are screwing with us. Rey will become Darkseid and Kylo will embrace the equilibrium and become something new as a good force because, as you said, and it's known, Ben is a Skywalker. I still think this movie will be another disappointment and that I have to see it regardless, but we will see. Sorry that I won't keep my train of thoughts on Star Wars, but yeah, I'm not. My letter is more about Ip Man. Ip Man. I have to admit that I'm not a big fan of Chinese movies or Oriental cinema. Oriental cinema? Asian cinema, you mean? In general. They are far too sci-fi for me, if you can say that. I understand. Too much flying, more like extreme flying in most of the combat scenes, or the simple fact that when it's emergency on the spot, characters tend to react fast but don't know what to do when they get there. Anyway, I could not say much about Chinese movies since I don't watch most of them. I'm telling you, son, there's some great Chinese cinema out there. John Woo, Hard Boiled, The Killer, Bullet in the Head, God of Gamblers, Better Tomorrow. There's so many good movies. Wong Kar-wai's cinema. Sweet Hark. Anyway, there's so many people. I have to admit, though, that most European or American movies infused with Chinese myths are dope. A few thousand years, civilization has lots of stories to tell. One of my favorites is Ip Man. Man, again, dude, you and I, we park our shuttlecraft in the same garage. Now, if those of you who don't, if you don't know Ip Man, Donnie Yen plays Ip Man. He was a real guy. And there's 3 Ip Man movies that are in the Ip Man series. And then Wong Kar-wai himself made a movie about Ip Man called The Grand Master, which is a stunningly beautiful movie. I recommend them highly. I actually have a steelbook. I think it's a steelbook of all 3 Ip Man movies. One of my favorites is Ip Man. Most of that feeling comes from the verisimilitude in the movie, in the compounds of a Chinese movie, and also probably because they targeted outside their borders by casting American actors. I have seen and re-seen the trilogy a few times now, and I love it. For me, the actor playing Ip Man, Donnie Yen, is incredible. Yes, of course, Donnie Yen, and we've seen him where? I'll leave that for you to decide. I could sound racist, and it's not my intention, but saying that the Chinese actors are a little hard to read when it comes to expressing their feelings, in this case. I mean that in a more traditional way, like laughing or crying and all of those feelings in between. I could be wrong, but that's my impression. No, I mean, Chinese is a different culture. That's a fair thing to say. With Ip Man, we have a different kind of hero and a different kind of story, I think. Donnie Yen is the cold-hearted, chill, and tempered master of the martial arts, but he's also a husband and a father. For most of the film, you can see feelings pouring out of him in his calm and focused eyes. It's beyond me how they managed to capture this. What are your thoughts? What do you think of Donnie Yen, and what do you think about his portraying of this character? Like always, best regards from Europe, CK. Well, CK, Ip Man rules, Donnie Yen rules, and Chinese cinema rules. You know, I've been watching Chinese cinema since I was a kid, you know, and wuxia movies and wuxia movies. Wuxia, it's spelled wuxia, but it's wuxia. I've always loved those films. I've loved all the Hong Kong triad movies. I'm a huge fan of Chinese cinema and Asian cinema in general. I grew up loving Japanese sci-fi, and I was late to the Korean cinema genre, but over the last 20 years, I've become a huge fan of Korean cinema as well. And I do think one of the things has always attracted me to Asian cinema is the fact that people express themselves differently. Asian cultures are different than we are. Than, of course, Western culture. And I love that. I feel like I'm learning, I'm seeing a window into cultures that I don't necessarily know. I mean, look, watching there is a melodrama in Asian movies that it doesn't exist in Western films the same way it does. Like, you know, there's that camaraderie between, like, in Hard Boiled, Tequila, between Chow Yun-fat's character and the other, like, the characters, like his girlfriend, Chow Yun-fat's girlfriend, and of course all the characters in the film, his boss and everything. There's a melodramatic aspect of it, a heightened emotional aspect that you wouldn't normally see. That's, I think, kind of an acquired taste. That might be something that you're responding to. That, like, when we have our hard-boiled cop thrillers, I mean, they're hard-boiled cop thrillers. There's not a lot of time for emotion or girlfriends or melodrama unless, you know, your girlfriend's like a crack addict or something. They don't have that. And I like that. I think that the difference in Asian cinema is great. That's why I love J-horror so much, and the existential nature of movies like Pulse, are just different. And I think that's what you are responding to. But that's what I feel that way about cinema from most different countries. It's the soul of the countries and the people that are the nationalities that are infused in those films that make them a little different. That's always attracted me. Same is true of, like, look, there's a Polish movie I've talked about a lot on the show. It is a horror musical. It is a female director, writer director, and it is a movie called The Lure, and it's a horror musical about real mermaids. I don't know if anybody but this Polish writer director would have made that movie. So that's one of the things I think is great about world cinema, is you do get an insight into culture, and also, like, the relationship between guys, like Tony Leung's character in Hard Boiled and Tequila, the relationship they have with one another. There's a melodramatic or heightened emotional bond. They're not afraid. Asian cinema is not afraid to have heightened emotions between men and women, between everybody. Everybody's emotions are such a big part of it. And sometimes it might seem a little overbearing, but I like that. But I think Ip Man, all three movies are very much worth watching. So is Wong Kar-wai's The Grand Master. But Donnie Yen, of course, is one of the great treasures of the world, and it's so much fun to watch him. And the martial arts on display is incredible. And I can't say enough about those movies. I'm glad that you like them, and I'm glad that you're watching them. I think that's great. Now this. There's another link here, but I wanted to read this. I wanted to read a link. Let's see. Here's another letter. See, these are all over the place. It's great. Hang on, let me see what you guys are saying. If you're saying anything, I don't know. I have to look and see. Yes. Here's a couple of good ones. Anthony Gonzalez says, "How did you get to write for Kevin Smith's website Movie Poop Shoot?" That's a good question. For those of you who don't know, in the early aughts, Kevin Smith had a website called Movie Poop Shoot, and it was like a movie magazine. I didn't write for it for very long because I was so busy doing all my DVD work that I just didn't have time. I think I wrote like 6 or 7 columns. I don't know if Chris Ryle, who works for IDW, I don't know if he contacted me. I don't know how I don't remember how Jeffrey Wells, who writes for Hollywood Elsewhere, he was writing for Movie Poop Shoot. There's a lot of good columns. I wrote a home video column called Rob's Retinal Fetish. Retinal Fetish being, of course, a movie reference. So I wrote Rob's Retinal Fetish, and I think they just asked me. Because, again, at the time, in the 90s, all of us geeks sort of knew each other. And, of course, I was the critic at large for Sci-Fi Universe magazine. So, and we were putting on geek events, and everybody kind of knew each other, at a certain level, at a certain strata. We were all starting out. We were all hungry and trying to do things. And what's really interesting is that exists now, but like being a YouTube pundit or something like that didn't exist. Screen Junkies and Collider and none of those things existed. And being a YouTuber or being a pundit on these shows is a goal unto itself now. All of the people that I knew in the 90s that were part of this sort of geekosphere, we were all covering movies and reporting and doing this kind of punditry as a stepping stone to actually making films and working in the industry. So while we were all doing this, we were also working in the industry. The same thing is true now. I'm still working on many different film projects as I am doing the Schmodown or doing John's show or doing this show. And it's fun to do. It sort of reconnected me with my geeky passions. It keeps me going. But I think I was just asked to write for Movie Poop Shoot. Somebody approached me and asked if I would do it. And that was because of the people you know. And what's interesting now is, Chris Stuckman. I really like watching Chris Stuckman's reviews. I really respect him, and I like what he does. He doesn't live in LA. Jeremy Johns, they brought him down here to do Awesome Tacular, but he lives in Puyallup, in Washington State, where the Puyallup Fair is. Do the Puyallup, which is coming up, Western Washington Fair. You can do it at a trot. You can do it at a gallop. You can do it real slow so your heart won't palpitate. Just don't delay. Do the Puyallup. Do they still have that song? They used to play that. That and the Princess Marguerite song when you go from Seattle to Victoria. Have a crumpet and tea. I know Greg might know what I'm talking about, but all of you are going, what? But yeah, so at the time there was a small group of people. And we all kind of were living in LA, and you all kind of knew each other. Now, everybody who's doing all of these, whether it's Red Letter Media, whether it's Stuckman, whether it's Jeremy Johns, I mean, we're scattered all over the place now. And movie punditry, a lot of people, like, you can become a movie pundit and do very well for yourself on YouTube. You can make a really good living, especially if you got in on the early days on YouTube. And it's great. Like, I don't know if I'll ever make a great living doing this because my channel is small, but I have my analytics are through the roof because people are watching the channel for a long time. But I really, it's nice that it's this channel, and I really appreciate everybody who donates to the channel and sends me super chats and also sends me letters and all that, because what this channel has done for me is it's reminded me, doing these chats, doing Robservations has reminded me what it was like, the excitement of living in Los Angeles in the mid-90s, connecting with other fans, and it's sort of re-energized. I always say I'm a middle-aged man with one foot in his grave. It has kept me from being disillusioned doing this. Not that I was going to get disillusioned, but making movies, it's become a grind. And, you're either in the club or you're out of the club. And it's harder now than ever before to get stuff going. There's so much content out there. It's to make. I see so many people making wonderful movies, and then that's it. They never get another movie off the ground. It's so hard. But I feel like now doing this, it makes me feel literally like I felt 20 years ago in the mid 90s when I was a young man. And it's fun just interacting with you guys asking me all these questions, and it gets me energized. I feel. I feel like I'm going to go start hitting the bag again and work out and get down to 200 pounds, man. My fighting weight. I weighed 195 in high school, and I was skinny. And it's been great. It's been great. It's been great doing this. And I miss those days when people just call you up and go, hey, you want to write for a movie poop shoot? Or, hey, I'm doing a shoot this weekend. Can you come work on a music video? It was like, yeah, man. Now everyone's too busy to do that. But David Galvez says, if you could only buy one David Lynch film, which one would you choose? Man, that is tough. That is a tough one. You know what? I think David Lynch's best movie, which isn't exactly his most Lynchian film, is The Elephant Man. I think The Elephant Man is a wonderful, wonderful, world-class film that I think only maybe if David Lynch didn't make The Elephant Man, maybe Tim Burton would have made The Elephant Man. But The Elephant Man is such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful movie. And I think The Elephant Man, look, you can't show Blue Velvet, you can't show Fire Walk with Me, you can't show Inland Empire, you can't show Mulholland Drive to just anyone. But I think The Elephant Man is probably his most accessible movie, and I dearly love that film. Dearly love that film. Luke Beckett says, did you get verisimilitude from Richard Donner? You know what? He was definitely one of the people, but I was a big fan of the word verisimilitude first. I want to say, like, the Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns was one of the producers of Superman the movie, the special features that came out on DVD. I want to say in the early 2000s, when Superman the movie first came out, and they had the great documentary, great behind the scenes documentary. I think that was the first time I heard Richard Donner say the word verisimilitude, but I already loved that word because the idea of creating a reality within the proscenium of a film frame, has been something I've been obsessed with my whole life. Like, how do they make something look real? Because, when at 10 years old, when I was seeing movies like Star Wars and seeing, of course, a couple of years later, Alien and all of that, the creation of that gritty realism became part of my whole thing. Like, how do you do that? How do you turn on a camera and make something look real? It's been a thing in my whole life since I was a kid, but I didn't. And I had looked up the word verisimilitude early on, even back in the 80s. And it was just a favorite word of mine. And now I just have a venue where I can just repeat it over and over and over again. So yeah, but yes, that was, I believe, if memory serves, that was the first time in that documentary that I actually heard somebody else, a filmmaker, say it in that context. And after that, I'm like, I'm in. But yes, it wasn't the first time I heard the word, but it popularized it for me to be like, I can say that word out loud. This one comes from Doug Harris. This is actually a good letter. Hello again, Notorious RMB. I would like to discuss something that was brought up on the John Campea show. You and John were discussing comments made by Mark Maron on Conan about the grown male nerd child's comments. I felt that you and John discussed the style of his point and not his actual point. I took his quote from a YouTube article written by Ben Arnold. Now, I got to go travel 15 or 20 minutes to a smaller movie theater to see a grown-up movie with other grown-ups where we can all sit together and not understand the ending, That's part of the experience, where you walk out, you're like, I don't know, did that guy die? It's not clear. It's not clear. That's the kind of movie I enjoy. As a proud grown male nerd child and a fan of his type of humor, I understand how he feels completely. While I love the MCU and the original Star Wars trilogy, they aren't my favorite movies. Horror is my favorite genre. Last year, I wanted to see Hereditary, and this year, Midsummer. My local theater, which I have their movie club membership, only had 2 showings, so I had to wait for home release. I understand these movies are billion-dollar franchises in capitalism, but I also feel that studios and theaters are leaving money on the table from more adult movies. I will admit I don't know how or even if this is possible, but theater chains, for their survival, need to pressure the studios to bring back the mid-budget movies. Only a finite number of dollars are available, and the theaters can't just live off billion-dollar movies. Thank you for your time, Doug Harris. Well, Doug, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Yes, sir. I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, the world we live in has changed. And the studios are making what sells, and the movie theater chains are booking the movies that make the most money. And I think, look, the streaming world has not just provided us great content. The streaming world has changed the paradigm of why and for what do people go to movie theaters for. Like, look, I miss the days when I was, if you look at Paramount's output, when they were making movies in the early 90s and like the political thrillers, the Jack Ryan movies like, I don't know, what The General's Daughter or whatever. Even Friedkin's Blue Chips. Those movies are not being made anymore. I mean, can you imagine the idea that a Tom Clancy novel won't be adapted by a major studio? What movies have turned into is basically 4-quadrant event films for the whole family. And that's what studios are banking on. The more adult fare is going over to streaming services, rightly or wrongly. I would much rather I miss going to see Hunt for Red October. I haven't seen Angel Has Fallen, but I keep hearing that it kicks ass. I like the first 2 movies, but part of my problem is I get so busy, I don't go see those movies, or I go see them second round. I'm behind by like 3 weeks. I'm behind movies like 3 weeks behind as I catch up. I used to go see everything all the time right away, but I'm just behind. So when I go to the movies, I'm like seeing a movie from 2 weeks ago. Whether it's Toy Story 4 or something. And this summer I've been behind by 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm going to go see Midsummer, the director's cut this weekend because I can't wait. I think it starts today. Maybe it'll start tonight. Maybe I'll go this evening. And you're right. We've talked about the fact they should have a different tiering policy. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of really good movies that have not done well because why people have now been conditioned to go see these big spectacles. And when indie films like Blinded by the Light, which I really want to see, I might go see tomorrow. I think I might go for like the trifecta. I want to see Blinded by the Light if it's still playing. I might go for the indie trifecta tomorrow. Yo, what's up? And see these wonderful movies because I like seeing movies in the theater. Hell, I'm a huge Nick Hornby fan, but I didn't see Juliet Naked. I watched it the other night on cable or on streaming. I think on HBO or something. I hadn't seen that. I really, really wanted to see that. And I think you're right. I think they need to start with mid-tier pricing, and they need to make these kinds of movies bankable. But, like I talk about Jack Ryan, now they're doing a Jack Ryan streaming series on Amazon, and it's really good. John Krasinski playing Jack Ryan. I mean, it's not exactly the Jack Ryan. I mean, I'm waiting for a streaming service to do Red Storm Rising because that would really get my blood up. But 10 episodes or whatever, 13 episodes, and I can really get into it. It's great. The world has changed. The movie theater experience, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of foreign films opening, and there aren't a lot of mid-range movies. And studios, they can't even justify with the way things have changed. Think about it. Look at Disney. People are always bitching about, Disney's taking over everything. But they're only releasing like 8 movies a year. If you think about it, 8 or 10 movies a year, that's all Disney's releasing. There's 365 days in a year, and Disney's releasing 8 to 10 movies, if that. And they're all making $1 billion. And Disney's gobbling up the theater. No, they're not. They're not gobbling it up. They're just, when they're making movies, each one of their movies makes $1 billion. And what we need is look, I can't wait to see The Goldfinch. I love Donna Tartt. The woman has only written 3 books. One of my dream projects would be to adapt her novel, The Secret History. I don't think as a director, I've only directed 1 movie 20 years ago. If somebody said to me, Rob, you can have The Goldfinch, as much as if you could have The Secret History, as much as I would love to direct The Secret History, I don't have the chops. I might as well not have directed a movie. I'm trying. My goal in life right now is to get back on the directing tip, and I would like to direct movies. Now, I'm primed. I've produced Tango Shalom. I've edited Tango Shalom. I'm post-supervising Tango Shalom. Hopefully, I'll be editing Lucas's Kendall Skyfighter. But I want to get back to directing. But I need to direct another indie movie, and not only that. Directing an indie movie isn't enough anymore. Like it was in my day, you have to make a cool indie movie. Free Enterprise at the time wasn't considered cool. It was geeky and it was too Hollywood or whatever. I'm like, what? But it's not enough to make a good indie movie anymore because look at Blinded by the Light is a lower budget film. It's a wonderful movie. Who's going to go see that, especially in America? About a Pakistani kid who is living in Britain who discovers Bruce Springsteen. What do we know about the whole Pakistani community? We don't have that. I first heard about the British Pakistani community in the movie My Beautiful Laundrette back in the 80s. But nobody knows about that. So the problem is really we're now conditioned to go to theaters to see giant spectacles, and we're not conditioned to go see smaller movies. It's just changed. We watch those things streaming. But I agree with you. I think to get people back in the theater, promote the fact that wonderful low-budget movies, you get to see them half price. You got to change the pricing tier, and that's how you get people in. But both Hereditary and Midsummer have done very well. Indie horror, classy indie horror, has made a lot of money, and I think that's really great. I'd like to see more of it. By the way, if you guys, I tweeted it out yesterday. There is a trailer for a movie that played at Fright Fest. There's an article about the 30 best movies that were at Fright Fest, and now I can't even remember the damn name. I'd never heard of this movie. It's supposed to be the best movie that played at Fright Fest. Totally intense. Here, let me look it up. Just because since I'm on the horror tip. Let's see. Fright Fest, red room or something. Let me see if I can do a Google search and New Jersey's most fright fest. Let's see, 2019. I'm gonna look it up for you. See, no, that's I don't know what it's called. Look at my Twitter feed. Follow me on Twitter, Burnett RM. I tweeted about it yesterday. I mean, it looked like a winner. Man, it looked. Apparently, it's like some cult movie where a woman thinks she's pregnant, and then they take her baby, and then she's not pregnant anymore. Like they literally cut it out of her, and you don't know if it's a satanic cult, and then she's going to go wreak havoc and get her baby back. It looks amazing. Can't wait to see it. We shall see. I don't know. Paul in Long Beach. Paul in Long Beach has a letter. Let's see. Actually, before I read Paul in Long Beach's letter, I'll see if you guys have anything at all to say. No one's dropped in down. No one's dropped in to mention. Paul in Long Beach. I love Paul in Long Beach. I don't know what this letter is going to be, but I'm sure it's going to be amusing, whatever it is. Ooh, this is a good one. Paul in Long Beach. He's not trying to be funny. He actually is going to send in a reminiscence about the 1981, which I talked about the other day. Morning, Rob. As we've had these conversations over the past couple weeks, I've personally been feeling a bit nostalgic about a time in my life when the movies were king. As I've said before, my parents divorced when I was a child. For my brother and I, the multiplex was a babysitter. I had no business seeing Dog Day Afternoon. I have an ongoing joke that explains my irrational fear of Tina Turner due to the fact that I saw Tommy way before I was aware of who the Who were, aware the Who were an actual band. So often we've discussed the impact of the films of 1982. Today, though, I'd like to talk about 1981. For me, this was the first year of independence. The first time I was able to do what I wanted to do and to see the movies that I wanted to see. I turned 12 at the beginning of that year, and it's fair to say that my outlook on life changed as suddenly as my transformation. All of a sudden, girls became girls. And my interest in movies changed along with the new hair that was blossoming in weird places. I had seen naked women on film my entire life, yet all of a sudden, out of nowhere, one movie affected me. Excalibur. It's important to remember these types of movies were rated PG at the time. It would be an obvious R in today's standards, and to be perfectly honest, cinema employees weren't forced to care in those days. Excalibur was rated R. There might have been a PG version of it, but Excalibur was rated R. Actually, let me just check. Now that you've got me going. What was Excalibur's rating? Let's see. Film rating. I think it was rated R. And I'm going to use this. Let's see what it says. Why can't it just tell me what the rating is? Why is it not telling me this? Let's see. No, it just gives me I don't know. I think it was rated R. They might have had a, you know what though? Maybe you're right. Anyway, Excalibur. It's important to remember these types of movies were rated PG at the time. It would be an obvious R in today's standards, and to be perfectly honest, cinema employees weren't forced to care in those days. I saw Excalibur 6, maybe 7 times, and not because it was a sword and sorcery epic. Oh no, I always waited to see Helen Mirren, and good God, how much I wanted to be Charlie Borman. It's fair to say the Dame was my first screen crush. It would be much more appropriate to say she provided me with my first screen-activated Woody. I never missed a John Borman film after that. The greatest double feature in my life was Raiders of the Lost Ark and For Your Eyes Only. During that summer, I saw Stripes, History of the World Part 1, and Clash of the Titans. Never mind the Cannonball Run or that little movie, Superman 2. I used my allowance to see Escape from New York, An American Werewolf in London, and S.O.B., 3 movies I own on Blu-ray. S.O.B. as a film was directly marketed as, and I hope Rob will back me up here, See Julie Andrews Topless. And for those who haven't seen the movie, they were spectacular. She actually says in the movie, Do you want to see my boobies? And yes, they were spectacular. Oops, I meant that the movie was spectacular. Takedown. It was a spectacular takedown of the Hollywood system at the time. My father took me to see Arthur. My mom took me to watch On Golden Pond. Somewhere in between, my sense of humor was influenced by Time Bandits. As usual, was everything idyllic? No. I saw Under the Rainbow, The Legend of the Lone Ranger, and Caveman as well. The Legend of the Lone Ranger with Clinton Spilsbury. I saw that at the John Dance Theater where I saw Superman the movie. I have no idea why all of this popped into my mind. I'm writing this to the Post-Geek Singularity. Anna, my wife, is behind the wheel, driving south on the 101. Yesterday was our 15th wedding anniversary, and we spent a couple of days in Santa Barbara and Solvang. I've previously mused to the connoisseurship that, trust me, I've been married for almost 18 years. That's not accurate. Our first date was 18 years ago yesterday. Our wedding was 15 years ago. She's the most alluring, funniest woman I've ever met. A few weeks ago, when I told her this guy I've been interacting with on YouTube might come over, you know what she said? Nothing. She looked at me like I had lost my mind. A literal, what the F, Paul, really? When Rob called me that evening after we'd been imbibing all afternoon, she was clear. Hey, dummy, you're way too stumbling drunk to appear on camera. Gosh darn it, she was right as usual. Happy anniversary, sweetheart, Paul. Well, Paul, let me just say I've quite enjoyed getting to know you, and talking to you on the phone was fun. I did want to come over. I mean, we were pressed for time, and the traffic down in downtown Long Beach was insane for that. I didn't realize how big that Halloween-themed convention was. It was amazing. It was huge. But when I called you at night, I have to say, you were hammered. It was great. But I want to thank you for that letter. That was great. I got to say, the summer of '81, as you just pointed out, that was also the first summer that I had a Sterling Recreation Organization pass. So I got into all the movies for me and a friend for 50 cents, thanks to my Uncle Jerry, who was the president of Pacific Theaters down here in LA. So that was awesome. But yeah, I mean, think about those movies. S.O.B., Escape from New York, Superman 2, and American Werewolf in London. I have to tell you, I first saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. They used to have public sneaks where they would release a movie in advance, and it would usually play with another movie because it was like a free. You bought a ticket to one movie and saw another. I saw Excalibur, and you might be right now that I think about it. Maybe Excalibur was in fact rated PG, but it's hard to believe with the kind of violence and sex. Since you brought up Excalibur, so I first saw Raiders of the Lost Ark on a second bill with Excalibur like 2 weeks before it opened. But I've told this story before, but since you brought up Excalibur, the summer of '81, it was awesome. And I saw Arthur 4 times. Arthur is still one of my favorite comedies. Arthur, Take My Hand. But I would leave you with one. I love that movie so much. It's so good. I think I'll have a bath. I'll alert the media. There's so many great one-liners. But so when I did The Usual Suspects disc for the first time, first disc I produced myself. I was producing it with Kerry David, but that it was my own company producing Usual Suspects. And at the time, when I would interview celebrities, I've talked about my trick, how I would start out by talking about something that's totally unrelated to what we're, like an icebreaker, totally unrelated to what we're doing. So I had to interview Gabriel Byrne. And we were at the Sunset Marquee, and he had a hotel room there, and I went and interviewed him, set up in his hotel room, and I said, dude, before we start this interview, I've got to talk to you about Excalibur. And he laughs. I'm like, you are Uther Pendragon. Like, you rode the dragon's breath, and you actually had sex with Igraine, who was John Borman's actual daughter, while you were wearing a full suit of armor. And he laughed. He's like, with his Irish brogue, he would say, he said, no one remembered I was even in Excalibur. I'm like, I remember. And I did. And we were off to the races. So I love Excalibur. You know, at the time I didn't love it. I came to love it more. I love Excalibur. What a crazy, it's kind of like the Blade Runner of Arthurian movies. I mean, it's so good. If you guys haven't seen Excalibur, what a movie that is. I love Excalibur so much. And if you haven't seen it, you should watch it because it's hugely stylized and totally awesome. Well, anyway, everybody, that's 2 hours, man. I wanted to make some sweet love to The Empire Strikes Back today. I think we all did that. All of you members of this Post-Geek Singularity community, thanks for hanging out to give some Star Wars love. I have to say, I will not be here tomorrow. We are recording many episodes of the podcast I do, the Inglorious Trexperts. Mark Altman is back from Bulgaria, producing his show Pandora. So we will be recording many episodes of the Inglorious Trexperts. So I will not be here tomorrow. I'll be back on on Saturday and Sunday, and then I'll be back on the John Campea show on Monday. But I will not be here tomorrow. So I apologize. You're going to have to go a day without. What can I say? But I want to thank, first of all, my moderators, the Honorable Mike Bodden, the Mayor of Riverdale, Iowa, Detective Jim Boyers, Terry in the UK, our D'Artagnan, who probably could be Uther Pendragon if he wanted to be, and of course, Greg Smith. It's great to have you guys, great to have them policing the community. You know, not that it needs to be policed, but to keep it the nice place we know it can always be. Great to have them there, great to have them do their work. So thanks, guys. I appreciate that. And thank everybody. I thank all of you for supporting the channel, for supporting me personally, for supporting the Burnettwork, the website, supporting the show. It's great. It's very much appreciated. By the way, the website is just blowing up. People are going there. They were commenting on letters. I'm getting a deluge of letters. If I haven't read your letters, I'm going to get to them eventually. And we're putting up the letters I read on the website so you can go respond and talk. And it's just been great. Watching this community is just building, and there's more subscribers every day. And I really appreciate that. And it makes it all worthwhile. So anyway, I'm going to bring this chat to a close. And I'm sorry we didn't talk about pineapple pizza today. No, okay, I'm not sorry, but maybe tomorrow. Anyway, I'm going to bring this chat to an end, and I'm going to say, as I always do, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all beliefs, genders, gentle beings, aliens, however you identify yourself, thank you for being here. I hope this is a place where you feel welcome, that you can talk and listen and say things that, and you feel this is a safe environment. By the way, not a safe space, because this is a place where we talk about provocative ideas, but we're all adults here. This should be a place where you feel welcome, but everybody should feel welcome. And we can talk about anything, which is great. And thank you for indulging me and my love of all of The Empire Strikes Back. The Richard, I was going to be on John's show tomorrow. I can't because I forgot I was doing the Inglorious Trexperts thing. I thought it was next week. That was my bad. So I have to call him and tell him I can't do tomorrow. But normally I don't do the Friday show on the John Campea show, Thursday or Friday. But he wants me to come on Friday, so we'll see. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next time. Have a better day.